Any public comment, thoughts on this item? Do we have any public comment cards on this item? No. Well, certainly if you guys, take a deeper look into it, or need more time to review and you see something else, definitely shoot me or Chastity an email. While we're still in the edit phase, we hope in the next couple of weeks to finalize editing, make sure everything is perfect. And then of course, request our translating services, which could take a couple of weeks to translate into all of our languages. But hopefully we would have this in October for release to our LEAs to start using this version with families. Since many of these policies just came off of notice of intent, now is definitely the time for us to update and get it out to our LEAs. Okay. If there's no further discussion, like I said, if you do find something else, just email us. And we're happy to take a look. So the next item I feel like we can go ahead and address is a consideration of our 2023-2024 local SEEK report. So you all have a hard copy of this. It's also being posted to our website for public access as well on our reporting page. Remember, every year we're required to collect a report from every LEA on their activities that they have accomplished that year in their local special education advisory council. Those requirements are also set out in legislation. And remember, we had an update as well that you all helped us codify into state policy just September, feels like forever ago. In September, we put all of those reporting requirements for our LEAs into state policy as well. And of course, we've already been communicating with our directors about the new 3 requirements from the law that will be in place by the time, and they will be required to add to their report they submit to us this May for this year. And so those 3 new requirements, just to refresh your memory, are a report of their student with disabilities academic performance. So that was put forth into law. The second one is a report on any non-compliance that has been identified in special education in their school system. And this always happens to me. I remember 2, not 3. And the third one is a report on their financial information, so their IDEA spending around special education. Those are the only 3 things named in legislation that they are now required to put in their reports. I think last year, this group, and of course our directors also requested if we could design a template for them, make it easy for them. What are some of the things they could put in these reports and report to the public? And so we got some input from SEEP last year, shared a template. We've updated it with these new 3 things and shared it with directors, and we'll continue to communicate that because I know we require a lot of them and a lot of reporting of information from our LEAs. So we like to reiterate and recommunicate to make sure that we're hitting all of our intended audience. But the report that you have in front of you are the results from our collection of the 2023-2024 reports. LEAs are also required by law to post this report on their website. And so just so we are not collecting and handing over to you hundreds of pages, we collect where their link to where their report is. And so if you're interested in Ascension Parish, you go to Ascension Parish, click on their link, and it brings you to their report of their activities. So always like to bring this report to you all. And look, share it with your stakeholders, share it with your communities, just in case people wonder or are curious about the activities of their local SEEK. We always recommend to our LEAs to put information in their report for how parents and how stakeholders can get involved with their council. Um, whether they want to apply to be on their local council or whether they just want to attend meetings uh, for interest and information. So just, wanted to share this with you all. I know we share it every year. And again, we'll post it publicly online as well. We received more this year than we've ever received. So I'm very, very proud and very thankful of our LEAs. I know we ask a lot of them. We ask a lot of them in terms of reporting and to send us information every year. Certainly at the end of year is a time of year we ask them to do a lot of things for us. And so we got more this year than we've ever gotten. There are a few where I know, and of course, those of you who know me, I reached out to every one of these people multiple times, right? Every one of these LEAs, hey, because number one, this is about access to the public for the information. And number two, I want all of our LEAs represented. And I know there are some where, for example, the ones that you see missing are extreme cases where, perhaps the sped director was out or on leave, and they didn't have as many meetings, didn't have anything to report on. So there were some of those that are missing that are extreme cases. And I've kind of known, have talked to LEA directors about what happened, what's the plan for this year to make sure their meetings are happening and that they're able to report on those activities. So we do a lot of follow-up around all of our collections, but certainly this is one that we really start in May after it's due, really reaching out to LEAs to encourage those submission and reaching out to our charters to encourage those submissions as well. So we definitely improved here in terms of number that we received. So I'll entertain any questions y'all have about this. Really, this item was just to share the information with you guys, tell you that it's going to be posted public, and of course, share it. Share it with your stakeholders who may be interested in seeing this information or pulling up the report for the LEA that they live in. Right? Any thoughts here, discussion, Ashley?
So I've noticed that some of the charters are the same charters from previous
Mhm.
years that don't have anything. Do we know if they even have a seek? Or if is there a way maybe we could, I don't know if it's appropriate for us as a panel to send something to them specifically, just
Yeah.
reminding them that they're legally required to have one, and this is the process for
Mhm.
recruiting like membership. Because a lot of them, and I don't have the previous year's report, but some of the names are sticking out to me that this isn't probably the third year that they haven't had anything.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering if we could maybe send something as a panel to those that are like 2 or more years without a report
Yeah.
to get like some type of status update. Do you even have one? Or are you having trouble recruiting? Because I
Yeah.
remember when the legislation was amended, we got some pushback from the special school, the school for the blind and visually impaired. We got some pushback. I think we got some pushback from some of the charters. But I don't know if it's appropriate, but just some of them are just repeat offenders. And I even wonder if they have like a legally formed seat.
Council.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea. Our team is working much more in tandem, and our school choice office works with us diligently to do outreach to all of the charters and make sure, of course, the ones that are Bessie operated, right? And I think sometimes we definitely saw an increase there in working with our school choice office for those Bessie operated charters. So I think it's a great idea for us to send just the requirements. We even did a guidance document a couple of years ago that talked about engaging stakeholders and includes all of the requirements to your point, like the membership, that you have to have one. And so, and I think that was, you guys thought, and I agreed that, a template is also helpful, and so that's not always something as a department we wanted to um, limit districts into, okay, this is what you should have on your report. This is the only thing you could have on your report. But I think in those cases, it also helps some of our charters and even our LEAs, our districts, to say, okay, I at least have a starting point for a report and what should be in here. So I think that's a great idea, Ashley. We can definitely send something to all of those charters, reminding them we're doing a much better job with our charters and communicating deadlines and what are our collections and what's due when, and making sure they're connected through our newsletters too, which is where we do a lot of announcements, and even coming to our events too, like our SPED director meetings and our office hours. We're seeing a lot more charter attendance. So I think we're seeing it get better, but I think we can always increase that communication and send them, hey, this is a requirement. Just, yeah, I think that's a great idea. Brandy?
Yes, so I work for one of the charter organizations, and so ours is.
Do you
one
get
that-
like, something that you see and
I
you're
think
aware in
that
our
there is
communications?
some loss somewhere that is
Mhm.
not connecting with the right people, because
Gotcha.
I know that we submitted ours like twice, but it's not listed here. So I don't
Okay.
know if it's going to the right place, but I know that we did meet the deadline to, I think someone reached out and then we resubmitted it, but it's still
Yeah.
not here.
That's very easy to happen too. So like we collect this through a Jot form submission or Google form submission. But then once we start reaching out, and like folks will email it to us, that's easy to get. Yeah. Well, I'll connect with you after and we can get yours. That doesn't surprise me that we definitely can overlook for sure. Anything else here? Okay. Well, let's go ahead. We still don't have quorum, but I do feel like, um, even with our 1530 item, which is item 7, we won't bring that policy until December, Bessie. So we do have some time, but I would like to talk through it with you guys. So if we bring that item back to November SEEP, maybe it doesn't take as long, and we can vote then. So let's go ahead and talk through. We won't be able to elect a co-chair today, so we can move that to November as well. But let's go ahead and talk through. So we started this discussion at our last meeting, right? But just to kind of level set, and we told you guys, I told you guys, hey, I'm going to bring you guys a proposal, be thinking about this. Um, so it's probably not a bad thing that we'll have one more meeting now that you have an actual proposal from us, and we can kind of talk about and then revisit in November as well. So let's kind of reorient ourselves around why we're bringing you guys this item, and why this is important. So we talked a little bit last time about the 1% cap on alternate assessment participation. So ESSA and the U.S. Department of Ed requires Louisiana and all states to ensure that we cap our participation on alternate assessment at 1% of our total student population. So we told you guys last time that Louisiana is currently at 1.7% participation in both ELA and math. We're okay for science. We are at the mark. We might be a little bit below 1% for science. But for ELA and math, that's the areas where we are above that 1%. Okay. We have been charged by the U.S. Department of Ed and OSIP to take steps to ensure we are going in the right direction and getting closer to 1%. And so we feel like our response is going to have to be, and we talked about this a bit last time, our response is going to have to be a multi-prong response. One of the ways that we are going to be able to address this is to revisit and look at our eligibility criteria and what criteria students have to meet in order to participate in alternate assessment. Okay, so let's take a look at our current participation criteria. So that you all know, once I started this discussion with you all in July, we have been having several conversations with our special education directors. We also had this conversation with our pupil appraisal staff across our state. So those staff who are deeply involved in the assessments and the evaluation around how students and are students eligible for alternate assessment. So we certainly wanted to get the input from the professionals who conduct these assessments and consider these students for alternate assessment eligibility each and every day and get their professional input on this. So let's start with our current criteria, okay? And before I do that, because we're going to talk about in these criteria, standard deviations, okay? And I know we have a couple of pupil appraisal experts around this table and in this room. So, but I feel like we need to really define and level set on standard deviations because we're going to talk about that a little bit. And they really are the crux of how you become eligible. And they are the standard way of determining in every state where a student falls in terms of average intelligence, okay? So that standard deviation is that measure of how dispersed the data is, okay? Imagine a bell curve, how dispersed the data is in relation to the mean or the average. So for a student to have a significant cognitive disability, we are looking at how many standard deviations below the mean. How many deviations, how far are they from average intelligence helps us determine what level is it, a mild, a moderate, a significant cognitive disability. And we're going to compare this to what some other states are doing around this too. So that is sort of that crucial measure of cognitive ability. And how do you determine where a student is performing in relation to the average? Okay, so that's what we're kind of talking about when we talk about standard deviations. So we have three current ways that a student can become eligible or meet eligibility criteria to participate in alternate assessment. So first, if a student has not completed 5th grade, this student is functioning 3 or more standard deviations below the mean in cognitive functioning, okay? Or if the student has completed 5th grade, they could be functioning 2.3 or more standard deviations below the mean in cognitive functioning. Or they could meet using what we call criteria C. Students who have completed 5th grade functioning between 2.0, 2.29 or more standard deviations, and they have deficits in adaptive behavior. Okay. A couple of years ago, criteria B also included, criteria A also included adaptive behavior. That was removed. I forget what year, Christine, you might remember. But the adaptive behavior piece remained in criteria C, right? So A is the most stringent way. And then it kind of goes down to C. It gets a little bit more, right? You could be functioning 2.9. And if you have some adaptive behavior issues, then you can also become eligible. Okay. this is our current criteria. Now, before we talk about the proposal, I want to walk you through a little bit of what we've done, right? So since we talked, you guys had some questions about, well, what data are we looking at? What do some other states do? And those were great questions, great suggestions. And so we started digging into all of that. One of the things we wanted to know, we also pulled our current students who are eligible for alternate assessment and what exceptionality category, right? There are certain exceptionality categories that by definition are not significant cognitive disabilities, right? Specific learning disability, emotional disturbance, for example. And we actually have those listed out in policy. One of the other things that we looked at, so we're very interested in looking at, do we have some of those exceptionality categories where we do have or have IEP teams that have determined those students eligible for alternate assessment, and why? We also looked at criteria A, B, and C and how many students currently, right? And remember, this can change on a daily basis. We have IEP teams doing important, hard work right now today. And so when we pulled this is what our breakdown looked like by those 3 different criteria. So we had 3,613 students who were eligible from criteria A, which is the most stringent, 3 standard deviations below the mean, right? Criteria B, we had, so you'll see B is the one where we have the most of our students becoming eligible, 5,525. And then we had criteria C with about 624 students using C to become eligible. So this was important for us just to kind of see where are our students falling within that eligibility criteria, okay, based on current standard deviations requirements that we have set. All right, so keep that in mind. And I want us to think about this. And I linked you to a couple of references, if you had time to look at them or click on them, but I also pulled out the criteria for these states because I too thought it was important to look at other states. What was their last alternate assessment participation rate compared to ours? And what are their criteria, right? So if you look at Alabama, has a straight 3 standard deviations below the mean. Okay, they're closer than we are, of course, to 1%. 1.4 in ELA, they're at 1.3 in math. Now, some of these states, all right, if you look at Mississippi, they're in the same boat as us, right? They got that same letter from OSIP that we did, saying you have to do something about this. Look at their criteria. They are across the board 2 standard deviations, all right? They're higher than we are, 1.8% for ELA, 1.8% for math. So they're in the same boat we are, going through very similar processes and rethinking their eligibility criteria. South Carolina, their criteria ranges 2.5 to 3 standard deviations below the mean. And South Carolina is currently at or below meeting the 1% cap. And then Arkansas has a 3 standard deviations below the mean standard, and they are at or below 1%. They were previously at 1.3 and have made some moves closer to 1%. So I do know there are states who are making shifts around this. So I think that we are approaching this in the right way. But remember, I told you earlier, we believe that this is going to have to be a multi-pronged approach. So we're going to have to address our eligibility criteria and the rigorousness of that. I also believe our team is working on developing a tighter monitoring system. I linked you to an example of what Pennsylvania does, but depending on how far even over. So for me right now, as a state, we're at 1.7. So school districts and LEAs that are exceeding 1.8 or greater, we need to be looking at, okay, what's happening. Now, look, we also have some small school systems. We have small charters. Small numbers can make percentages get really wonky. So that's something we have to think about. But LEAs that have even greater participation rates than we do as a state, we believe we should start there and also have a really rigorous monitoring system and looking into students, looking at certain exceptionalities, like I mentioned earlier, and eligibility criteria. And are some of these students truly eligible, meeting the criteria? Okay. So that's one prong that we know as a division are going to increase our monitoring and really look at eligibility. We have a couple of options around our eligibility criteria that I want to see, what you guys' passion or thought is. So it's clear to us, and we've talked about this with our special education directors. We've talked about this with pupil appraisal staff across the state. They will not be surprised when this criteria changes. We've been communicating this with them in a couple of different forums and getting their input. And they are very much, we know, in support of option one. And I know Christine is here as a director and can kind of speak to some of the conversations we have been having. So we have a couple of options here that I want to get you guys' thoughts on. We're not voting today anyway, right? Option one, we would suggest at least at a minimum, revising criteria B from 2.3 standard deviations to 2.5, right? And we kind of saw that, one of the states we looked at and a couple of states have that range, 2.5 to 3, they'll consider. And we saw some states that are doing better than us in terms of that participation rate, right? And repealing criteria C altogether. So that really, really lenient, I can be 2 standard deviations below. I have some behavior concerns, and I can be eligible for alternate assessment. Our SPED directors, Christine, would you agree, are open to that? And actually some suggested, yeah, we do think that C is a little bit too lenient. Christine?
Yeah, and I'm thinking too, just, interesting, it would be interesting to see what would the numbers look like if we just did 2.5 across the board.
Yeah.
And stop with the whole confusion component of 3.0 before 5th grade and all that kind of stuff. Just have it across the board 2.5 because it's very confusing for parents even,
Yeah.
like, okay, not now, but maybe
Wait,
later.
yeah. Am I in 5th grade?
Yeah. So it's,
Yeah.
it would be more clear, I guess. And then
Mhm.
how would that affect the numbers? If
Yeah.
there's any way to even find that out because they don't qualify yet, but they
Right.
will. And so that would be interesting to see how would that change the percentage?
Mhm. Yeah, and I know one of the things that we heard, and I'll be very honest, transparent with you guys. We had some questions, well, Meredith, what about kids? Can we grandfather in kids who are currently, and I think at first we said, well, if we grandfather, what are we ever going to change? However, when we start having conversations and thinking, one of the things you'll see in the draft language is we do kind of, for students who are already in high school and have been participating in alternate assessment, they could, right, and this is going to go into a little bit of April Dunn Act conversation because I think all of these things work together. If I'm a really diligent planning team, counselors, IEP team, I can figure out, depending on where I'm at in high school, a plan for a student coming off of alternate assessment to qualify for April Dunn and still get a diploma. But we also understand and heard that feedback, maybe you have a sophomore or a junior who've been participating in alternate criteria under some of this criteria, who may or may not have time to make a switch and still receive a successful outcome. And so that is something that we honored with these proposed changes is if a student is currently in high school and already eligible, that they can stick with whatever the criteria that they currently. However, so these changes, criteria B to 2.5, totally taking out C, would start for students entering high school next year. So for 25-26 is when the criteria would change. So that kind of gives kids in high school who are already on this track, because we know, I think like the also foundational understanding here is realizing that a student who is on an alternate assessment and addressing alternate standards are on a totally different track than students who are taking LEAP and on a regular diploma pathway. Dr. Reno, you had something to add? Mhm. Yes.
C would be repealed, so adaptive would not even, in either one of these options, adaptive is also.
Correct. Now, to Christine's point, and then I'll get you, Ashley. Option 2 is all of option 1. We could say in 4 years, LEAs, be ready, because no matter what, 3 standard deviations, right? There are some states doing that. Based on conversations, feedback that we've had, I'm confident we're ready for 1. Right? But there is an option, to Dr. Hargrave's point, is going a little bit, being a little bit more aggressive in saying and prepping our LEAs to say, hey, you have 4 years to prepare, make some adjustments with some students. In 4 years, we're going to require 3 standard deviations below the mean. Or to Dr. Hargrave's point, if we said 2.5 to 3, right? So there is a more aggressive option too. And I do think it will take us, I mean, of course, it's going to take us a couple of years, I think, to really see our percentages. I believe that our LEAs will start to be proactive and start to think about, because this will force them to start thinking about those elementary and middle school students, and will they qualify, right, under the new changes. So, I do think it will make our LEAs be a little bit more proactive and begin to think about elementary and middle school kids that maybe were being considered for alternate assessment under criteria B or C, and is that the right decision for that student? And I think there's a bigger conversation and more guidance. Our team has done a lot around, for years, around April Dunn. We have an opportunity in our state, per law, for our students with disabilities to have options to get a regular diploma. And so I think in some cases, we're not always taking advantage of that opportunity. But we are qualifying students for alternate assessment versus giving them the opportunity under April Dunn to demonstrate mastery in a different way than state assessment and obtain a successful high school diploma, right? And I know we are working very hard around April Dunn. I know a lot of our stakeholders were here when April was here and when that legislation was passed. And so, but we also find there's just a lot of repetitive communication needed each year about that opportunity, because that's something I think we're going to have to sort of counter communicate when we talk about this change. Is no, there's opportunity for these students, right? Thoughts about that? Go ahead, Ashley.
One piece that I feel like has always been lost in the April Dunn Act is the progression. and promotion. That piece has been just completely forgotten. We moved away from high stakes, I think the year after the law passed. And so there wasn't really this huge push from anybody to promote that because school systems were making decisions based on, the needs of sort of each child without considering,
Mhm.
putting in a different way. One thing that, I don't know if it was the last seat or the seat before, but the decline in students with disabilities graduating with a high school diploma it was a pretty significant drop. Like, I think we were as high as 79 or close to 80%. We dropped back into, I think, the 60s.
Mhm.
And so I do think for whatever reason, districts are not taking advantage of the April Dunn Act. And I think too, elementary and middle schools are just not using it at all. And so by the time, these kids enter high school, they've got a completely new system that's maybe not as familiar with the April Dunn Act. Parents aren't aware of it,
Right.
whatever it might be, but I would really like to see, option two. Maybe it's 2.5 to 3 instead of just a hard 3. And then maybe we look at, in 4 years after that, look at like where we're going, how the districts are doing.
Right.
But I do think that, decisions are being, made for accountability reasons. And the push for, school, performance scores. I think all of that plays a role, into this. And if they could really understand the benefit of the April Dunn Act.
Right.
And getting those kids a regular diploma, how much it would benefit their school performance scores instead of just pushing them off into the alternate assessment. So I think us as advocates have not done a great job. We've backed off the trainings on April Dunn as it's actually, I think it's 10 years this year.
Right.
That we passed the legislation. So maybe that's something that us as advocates that do parent trainings is something that we need to start bringing back.
Yeah. I think so, but and it's certainly something that our team talks about a lot. And we have, even in the past couple of years, released additional resources. It's definitely something that you can, get engrossed in all of the other things or all of the new legislation coming out, and you forget that key piece, that key lever to help support students. So. Any other thoughts? I do have one. So I wonder if, like, in looking at option 2, if we do 2.5 to 3 across the board, no matter what grade you're in, I do wonder if it's not as rigorous. Because with option 1, we're still keeping A criteria at 3 for those kids who haven't yet completed 5th grade. So there is still a set of kids with option 1 that it's 3 standard deviations for those kids who haven't completed 5th grade. So, and the thought there is they're still really young and we have time. We know what works. We know we can close achievement gaps for these kids. So I do like that with option 1, you still keep a pretty rigorous A criteria for those kids that haven't completed 5th grade at 3 standard deviations. Versus if we say, 2.5 to 3 in 4 years, period. For a set of kids, it gets right. It gets less rigorous. Christine,
How
you're my
can we
people person.
have option A along with option B? I'm sorry, criteria A along with option 1, changing the criteria B, because if they haven't finished 5th grade yet, but this option says 3rd through 11th grade. So that encompasses 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade kids, and the standard deviations are different. You see what I'm saying? Or am I misunderstanding that?
Say it one more time.
Okay, so this says to revise the criteria B to 2.5 standard deviations below the mean.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and that's for kids in grades 3 through 11. Criteria A, though, says that you have to have 3 standard deviations below the mean if they haven't finished 5th grade yet. So, but these students are covered 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade for 2.5 standard deviations below. So it
Gotcha.
contradicts. That's why I'm trying to, I think, it's just my opinion, if we just did the 2.5 across the board, just like it states right there for 3rd through 11th,
Mm-hmm.
and did away with the 3.0. That's what I was saying before about I wonder how that would change your numbers if you're now going to encompass 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders.
So if you look at the actual draft policy, A stays. I'm sorry. So like this summarizes. So A stays for students who haven't completed 5th grade. They're going to have to function 3 or more standard deviations below. But then B, for students who have completed 5th, they're functioning 2.5. So 2.3 and B changes to 2.5. And then C is gone.
So
You're-
that's incorrect.
So we need to scratch out for students in grades 3 through 11.
So that should be 6 through 11?
and repeal criteria C. Right, so we're repealing C for everybody.
Yeah.
But yes, you're right. Yep. So look at the draft. So the draft policy revises criteria B to 2.5 standard deviations below the mean. It still keeps for students who have completed. So we still have the breakdown of A and B. We keep criteria A and B. We change B to 2.5
Okay, so that
and
be-
repeal C altogether for everybody.
So that B up there for 2.5 should be 6th through 11th grade.
Yes. Yes. Sorry. That grade on the end is confusing. Yeah. I meant and repeal criteria C for everybody, but yeah.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
How soon do you want to get to to 1%? Because that's not gonna, we're at 1.7, like it's almost double. So how are you gonna get from almost double down? Like,
Yeah.
if you
It's-
tiptoe, how fast you want to get there? If you're gonna
Right.
tiptoe and you say, I'm gonna tiptoe my way there, that's
Right.
fine. But if you say, I got fire on my back, I gotta get there now, I don't know.
Yeah. I definitely think it's going to take us, we'll probably start to see some impact. Because like I said, I think that LEAs will be proactive and they'll stop using C probably when the policy goes out. Even though we said in here, it doesn't impact until 2025, 2026, next year and on. I think they'll stop. But you're right. I totally agree with you. How fast we want to get there. I think based on feedback that we received, the biggest concern is about those kids who are currently like our current 9th and 10th graders, who may have qualified using the 2.3, or criteria C even, and they're already in high school, in modified classes. And will they have enough time to switch tracks, earn Carnegie units, and demonstrate mastery? So I think that I was the same way you are thinking. And then we kind of got that feedback of, but wait, we've got to consider kids who have been identified and they're in high school and they won't have time if you take them out of that criteria. But I totally like your point.
Like realistically,
Right.
they're just, that's not gonna happen.
Right.
So, but if you're talking about the most significant in your population, I don't know, given.
Then I also kind of worry too about the kids who are in middle school who have already started this process. And they're, you know, they've qualified and they've been taking Leap Connect for sixth, seventh and eighth
Right.
grade. And now in high school, which is already a huge transition, you're going to now throw me into, you know, the gym pop. It, you know, I know that's an IEP team decision, but that's going
Right.
to be an action.
Right. Yeah, it can definitely impact them, right? Definitely. Hey, Christy.
Hi, good morning. Sorry I'm late. They had two bad accidents. on
That's
the way.
okay. We have heard that all morning. We totally understand and sympathize.
I wanted to ask, what about these children in middle school? Because I have some middle school students that are in self-contained, do the self-contained, curriculum, the standards and everything, but
Mhm.
take regular LEAP. And they're not the three standard deviations below, but yet we try to include them into regular ed and um, it's not, we try to do as much as we can to put them in regular education for
Mhm.
their classes. But their behavior and other things, it's not good for them. And which means their scores are below average when taking regular LEAP.
Mhm.
So,
Well, that's what we were talking about too. And, you know, some of those students, Christy, may benefit from, if they don't qualify for alternate assessment, they will benefit, most likely the April Dunn Act, right? And so once they get to, and that's why we kind of keep talking about high school, you know, those middle school students would be able to get to high school. They may have an IEP team placement decision and supports that are needed, but that IEP team can work together and determine what is the success criteria for that student. So they'll still have to participate in LEAP, but
regular LEAP
yes.
until high school,
right?
correct?
And then once, even in high school, they'll have to participate in LEAP. And then they can use that April Dunn Act opportunity, which is exactly what it was written and designed for, to give those students a different opportunity, a different set of criteria to meet mastery and still get a diploma. So we were talking about, Christy, right before, the communication and the supports that will need to happen around making sure those kids have that successful opportunity, right?
Yes, I'm just
But
concerned
I
because
gotcha.
they're in self-contained for a reason. Most of them are there for behavior and other things because they cannot be in the regular education classroom, even though we try to put them in for an hour or two. So then they're held to that responsibility of taking the regular LEAP test,
Mhm.
when obviously they cannot. Which hurts them because they're like, oh, I did bad. And then it hurts the school score and so forth. So now we have to wait until they get to high school in order for that to, because between fifth grade and high school age, they were done. The middle school, it's just like not purgatory, but like a waiting
Mhm.
area, you know. Just a thought.
I have a question about trying to get to the 1%
Mhm.
and the U.S. Department of Education's waivers that we ask for, right?
Yes.
Is there a deadline on those waivers? And do they have a target for when they want us at 1%? Because all of this is going to affect the money no matter what systems we put into place, right?
Right.
Is there a
right.
deadline on those waivers that we're trying to meet?
So they want us to begin showing progress. There's not really a definition for what that means. And so what they want to do is from year to year, they want you to go in the right direction, not the wrong direction. But no, Michael, they haven't given us, you have to be at 1% by this timeline. We submit that waiver every November. And they won't approve it if you don't show improvement and show progress, from one year to the next. So I think we'll start to show progress with the criteria change, likely not this year, right? Because we're not really going to change anything this year. Once we update policy, it'll go to notice of intent and it'll not really take place until next year. But I do believe that other pronged response of better and more in-depth monitoring from our division on eligibility determinations. Do students meet the criteria? That part we can start to impact and help LEAs work through the current eligibility criteria. Are you using and applying it appropriately? But it will take us time because of course this policy change won't even take effect, right, until next year. And then that will take time. So I am not sure if we'll see, any movement this year. We don't suspect that it will increase. But, you know, to answer your question, they want to see progress. There's no hard deadline of you have to get to 1% by this date.
Do we
We
ever
would like
see,
to start seeing progress soon.
do we ever see the amount of the waiver, the money that's involved in a waiver? Are you like, privy to that?
So it's not tied to, so our waiver around participation is not tied to any money. They can put holds on our state money, and tell us, hey, we're going to direct you, to spend some funding to help you address this, or spend some funding to work with a partner to help you fix it. But there's no tie to money. We're not losing money right now. Yeah. No. 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 No, sir. No, no timeline, just you have to address it. And we will have to report to them in November. Here are steps that we're taking. Here are things that we're doing as an agency to start see that percentage move in the right direction. And we've had some conversation about and questions about, well, Meredith, you know, is the U.S. Department of Education ever going to reevaluate the 1% cap? That's a great question. And I'll pose that to our state lead. I don't have any indication that the U.S. Department of Education is currently looking at the cap or where it's at. Is it appropriate? Is it not? This particular cap, I mean, hasn't been touched since they set it long ago. So, you know, when I was asked that question, I was like, that's not a bad idea. That's a great idea. And I'll pose that. But to my knowledge, there's no indication that USDE is going to change or reevaluate the 1% cap either. So we definitely have to take some steps. Yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
About, so if the criteria is gonna stay the same, I guess, starting at 5th grade, are we ever considering like LEAP scores in that process? Like how students performed in 3rd grade and 4th grade in order to even, because if they're right there at the cusp, then why would we even move forward with saying, oh, okay, 2.5, like you're literally like 10 points away, even
Right.
if you did meet that 2.5 standard deviation. So is that something that we would consider? And my other question is about the differences between ELA and math. So are other states allowing students to take an alternate assessment for certain subject areas versus others? Why is there like a disparity between the percentages?
So you can definitely have that. And Christine, I don't know if you want to speak to this as a director. You can definitely have students that it's rare. I will say that. Usually if you have a significant cognitive disability, you're going to take Leap Connect, period. But we do see rare cases where a student may take ELA, Leap Connect, and math. You know, you have some students that it's rare, but like twice exceptional, you know, and so you have some significant reading disabilities, but it's rare, but they could take Leap Math. Christine, you have anything else to add to that?
Of course, it's a IEP team decision, so those discussions are had at the table. And, you know, if you don't have consensus across the board, then there could be some leeway there. Just looking at the scores, there could be a strength per se in one area over the other, and the parent would like their child to take the LEAP assessment. the regular LEAP assessment over.
And see how they do
Just
for
to
that
see how they
particular,
do.
yeah.
Yeah, they do that sometimes. It
And
is
I
rare,
think
though.
what you said, Brandy, was spot on. So yes, IEP teams, should and are certainly looking at assessment history, LEAP performance, as they make any changes or shifts in a student's alternate assessment participation as well. There's also, appetite and interest for us to create a decision-making tool, like we did alongside SEEP. I guess that was 2 years ago when we created the K2 alternate assessment criteria. And we created a really clear decision-making tool, kind of a guide for IEP teams. Versus our 3 through 11 criteria, it's like, here's the criteria, go forth and make your IEP alternate assessment participation decisions. And so our team thinks that that is a wonderful idea, to create a similar tool for IEP teams. And that's something that we could do this year and have it ready for a new criteria to come forth. Ashley?
Do y'all have any data on the number of students in elementary and middle school that are on the April Dunn Act?
For sure.
I'm sure it's extremely low, but that is an option that has, again, I know I've already said this, that has just been forgotten.
Yep.
It has been extremely underutilized since it was passed.
Yeah.
And
And I know, like, we have conversations with parents who will say, hey, my child is scoring at a high level on Leap Connect. I'd like for them to try to take Leap. And I would encourage that, to see where they are. What is the ability? And if it is very much appropriate to switch and move over to LEAP, knowing that April Dunn Act is there, to catch them and support them and still getting a diploma. So I think, all of and Chrissy, I hear everything you're saying and those concerns too, and just kind of remembering that there is a way to support them. Right. So I know we met quorum right about 11. So I definitely want to, Ms. Champagne, if you're good, kind of open this up to the official quorum, to see if we want to take any action around this policy. It is my goal to bring this to December, Bessie. Like I said, that will give us time for it to go on notice of intent if Bessie approves and be ready for an implementation. Like I said, we'll be working with directors and letting them know what's being proposed and the potential change way ahead of that. But that still gives us enough time. We lost the mic. Oh, we did lose Mike. No. No, Dr. Lafarge is a proxy. Yeah, that's right. Okay. It's okay. We can still do, we can do it in November. I think we've had a lot of great, we've had a lot of good conversation around it. And I think I'm super appreciative of, you all's approach to this and being open to say, well, what if we want to be a little bit more aggressive? Because, I really think that that's not a bad thing. And I do think we'll have pretty great support for option one. And this gives us a little bit of time and y'all a little bit more time to think about what, a little bit more aggressive move that you may want to make around a second option to say, hey, in 4 additional years. So that's what kind of feels like forever. 2028. By that point, eligibility is going to be based on 2.5 to 3 or a flat 3. And we can run some additional numbers too, and think through what that impact might have. We haven't heard back. Let me follow up with OSIP because that's a great, so what Dr. Hargrave is referencing. So we also now have our K2 required literacy assessment, which is a statewide assessment. And those numbers, those assessment numbers could impact our denominator, increasing our total number of kids that this percent is coming from. And we're kind of waiting on USDE to tell us, do we need to include literacy? So all they say is ELA and math. So we're not real sure if they're going to consider DIBELS as a literacy measure, ELA, or if they're going to say, no, just give us your ELA and your math scores. But that, Christine, is a wonderful point to bring up. So I'll follow up and see if I can get Dr. LaFar is a what math? I did not teach math. That's true. We do have. Okay. That's true. So we do have a quorum. We have 11. So we can open up for official action if you all want to take action on this today. So we can, you can endorse the draft that's in front of you, which is option 1. It does not address option 2, right? Or anything, you know, that more aggressive push.
What does the monitoring system, I mean, y'all have all been talking about April Dunn in looking at the 1.8 or
Mhm.
greater, is that, and you said there's a disconnect somewhere, like people aren't reading, it's true, but they don't read.
Yeah.
I don't even know, call them and tell them. Is that the group that you really work hard with to swap, to give on them that alternative, or say,
So
like, who is the
starting,
monitor?
yeah,
Who's
no,
doing
that's a
it?
great question. So
Why?
starting right now, we have pulled current students who are eligible, where we can look at what is the student's exceptionality? Do they, by definition, have an exceptionality that warrants a significant cognitive disability? So are they accurately eligible using current criteria? So the monitoring is a process we will do as our team starting this year, looking at our LEAs who are at a 1.8% participation rate, meaning they're surpassing the state, our state average participation, and really start reviewing their IEPs, reviewing evaluation data to see if the current criteria was applied appropriately. And if the student's evaluation does have a standard deviation measure that is in alignment with the participation criteria, or did the IEP team determine eligibility when they really didn't meet criteria, right? So that piece can happen outside of policy change and will happen. And we've started pulling several thousand records to look in depth at students who are being qualified, right? And do they actually meet eligibility criteria? So those are actions that we're going to take with the LEA.
What if they do?
If they
Really do have a lot of kids who do. Yeah, what if we really are 1.8, or if we really are 1.7?
right.
I don't know.
We have, when we look at exceptionality, we can definitely see that we have some students with specific learning disability. We have some emotionally disturbed students with that exceptionality who have been made eligible for alternate assessment. And we know that shouldn't be the case, right? So I think that our goal is we've got to reduce it. We've got to go down. And we definitely think that, and there are probably some who are made, we know there are some kids who are eligible on criteria C. The question is, the proposal here is that that's not rigorous enough. And while we may have kids who currently our number looks like this because we had those 600 some odd students who are qualifying under C, but the proposal here suggests that's not a rigorous enough criteria. And that we should be looking at a standard deviation between 2.5 and 3 to suggest significant cognitive. So we think it will I think we will make progress. I do think it will take time to show progress going closer towards 1%. So we have some options here, right? So we could endorse the draft as it is. You could also endorse the draft with a recommendation to also put in that more rigorous option too. And you guys, I know you all know we would go back and change that before we go to Bessie. Or you know, you have an option. We have one more meeting before we would have to take action in November SEEP to be ready to go to December Bessie.
And how about the option with grandfathering those students in who are already qualified?
That's in the current draft. Yep. So if you're currently in high school and you are already qualified based on that eligibility criteria, you're kind of protected in that way. There are options though, for ninth graders, 10th graders, right? You know, the proposal, they're okay, they're protected, but I do believe there would be time for IEP teams and counselors to make a strategic schedule and plan for that student over the next 4 to 5 years to graduate with a regular diploma using April Dunn Act if necessary. But we didn't want to put any student in a particular place of without proper planning, they didn't have a successful outcome. So we did. The current proposal will grandfather those current high school students. Yeah.
Not always a bad thing. I'm not saying it is.
Mhm.
But if we get into option 1 and just see where that takes us,
Mhm.
if it gets us to the goal that we're looking for,
Or we start making progress.
and if, then boom, you know, we need to hit option 2 pretty quick. Finish 5th grade. And he functions above the 2.5. And he has to take regularly. And he needs a small group, he needs a one-on-one to keep him focused, and he has to take regularly. And he doesn't go to any PE, because if he doesn't come regular class, the outburst and would interrupt everybody else, they talk. This year, how do y'all even take this student? It's different with adding student in every
Mhm.
classroom. So, we're working on it, but that's my thing, is I think just because there are so many standard deviations below doesn't always mean that that's where we. So everything is different, and I think that's just a top. You know, right now, we're probably having to take regularly.
I think the cautions from Dr. Hargraver are relevant. I think your cautions are relevant. Like I said, I know, I believe we're ready for option 1. Option 2, it might take a little bit, we might need more time and we can see what happens. So I think if you guys want to take action today and say, we're ready to move forward. We know we want to do 1. We could move forward, endorse 1, see over the next couple of years what that progress looks like. Cause I promise you, I'll be bringing it back to you. And it's something that we're tracking. We know we have to address it. And we wait and see, right? Option two, we knew that we wouldn't put that in place for another 4 years. We need to give people time to work up to that. So, Ashley?
This option one. But I'd like to have a discussion about when we come back, I don't know if it's 2 years or 3 years, if we need to pull the trigger on like option two. Yeah, like at
Yeah.
what point?
Yeah.
Probably, well, I would like to, we need to reassess with, well, we need to see what our last participation, so we're getting that data now for the next waiver. So our waiver every year is due in November. So the 1.7 rate is for 2023 participation. So we are gathering our data, validating data for the 2024 Leap Connect participation. So I can bring that data back to you guys I mean, that's our next point, that we should share with you guys. And then I think after our next participation, I think this is something we should, with the concern with from USDE, the push on us and other states to address it. I think we need to look at this annually, probably, Ashley, and then, probably in at least 2 years, 1 to 2 more years, we need to be seeing, okay, what's happening? Are we at least making progress? And do we need to consider a more, an even more aggressive approach? I think the consensus is, and from our conversations, we're talking about removing criteria C and removing that adaptive behavior. That does not always mean a student has a significant cognitive, and we've got to give our kids the best opportunity to get the highest quality teaching and learning and the best outcomes as possible in school. And so they can go on and go to a technical college, may not be a 4-year, but go to a technical college or go to a 4-year college if they want, and have those experiences.
Got to do both from, the advocate side, getting information out about Able on that.
Yep,
I don't
agree.
if it's appropriate to put something in here about, not necessarily in this particular motion, but something.
One of our
about
actions.
Training on implementing Able done in elementary and middle school. Although it's way more difficult than making the decision to put them on alternate assessment, a lot more work for IEP teams. But I think it's gonna take both this and Able Done Act to really drive the numbers in the direction that we're wanting to see them go.
Right.
Bring it into that conversation when you post that up and say, this is where we're moving. We're moving here, but we didn't just say, this is where we're going. You have this little lifeboat with you. Let's bring it along and move them together, like in.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we have a motion to endorse the draft updates that are option 1, along with these other actions. Do we have a second? I think, and I tell you guys this every time we meet, I'm just so proud of the work that this panel's done over the past couple of years. This is gonna be really huge for our kids. And I think opening up additional opportunities for them to be successful, right? And to experience some post-secondary outcomes that maybe they didn't have access to on alternate assessments as well. Okay, great. Excellent. So I think. Do we need to vote? Okay. We'll do a roll call vote for the motion. Melissa Bahan. Yes. Ms. Champagne.
Yes.
Aaron Downing. Christy Gonzalez. Dr. Christine Hargrave. Brandy Healing. Caroline Jurish.
Yes.
Ashley McReynolds. Dr. Donna Reno. Julia Tanner. Jessica White. Excellent. Motion carries. And our next item of business is a consideration of a discussion regarding our upcoming OSIP IDEA monitoring. Do we have a motion to receive? Ashley and Ms. Champagne. All right. So for this particular item, I really just want to have a conversation with you all and give you an update and also kind of explain a little bit about what your role may look like in this particular process. So Louisiana is currently in a cycle of monitoring from the U.S. Department of Ed's Office of Special Education Programs. They are on about a 5-year cyclical monitoring process. I believe the last time they were here in Louisiana was around 2019. And so we are due for an Office of Special Education Programs monitoring visit. This particular monitoring system from the U.S. Department of Ed will really focus in on Louisiana's general supervision system, our state's responsibility to ensure that our subcontractors, who are our LEAs, meet the requirements of IDEA. So are our LEAs improving educational outcomes for children with disabilities? Our early intervention results and functional outcomes showing improvement for our children, for our infants and toddlers with disabilities across our state. At the same time, they are monitoring us. They will also be in our state, also visiting with early steps. Okay. So both of our agencies are getting monitored simultaneously. They are also, as part of our general supervision responsibilities, ensuring that our public agencies are meeting all of the program requirements, particularly for us, Part B of IDEA, particularly for early steps, Part C of IDEA. And really, they have a couple of areas that they really focus a lot of emphasis and attention on. So a couple of those areas, right? Monitoring and improvement. This particular panel has talked about that a lot in the past couple of years. Years. And we've, of course, also had our state audit around our monitoring processes. So this panel has done a lot in response to those, in policy response, in process response. And so they will likely ask questions about monitoring and improvement for us. Our data, our state performance plan, our annual performance report that we bring to this panel annually, fiscal responsibilities, dispute resolution responsibilities will also be an area that they take a look at as well. And so also in that area, we've also gone through a review, an independent review of our dispute resolution processes, a state legislative audit around our dispute resolution processes. This panel has helped us do a lot of work in response to that and improving policy and improving process. So we just started, I won't say we're finished. We're still in the middle of what they call phase 1, which is our discovery phase. We have shared approximately 900 documents, responsive documents, with the U.S. Department of Ed and OSIP, starting this summer. And I say we're still in phase one in engagement because they could certainly come back. As they're reviewing, they could come back, ask for additional evidence or responsive documents. So there are 3 phases to the monitoring. Phase 1 is discovery. So engaging with the state, asking for certain responsive documents. Phase 2 is what they call engagement. So during engagement, they will start to reach out to us, of course. They will also begin to reach out to key stakeholders. One particular key stakeholder group is, of course, our state panel. So I wanted to bring this to you all to put it on your radar, and to let you all know that we will share your contact information that you have on file with us. And likely a U.S. Department of Ed or OSIP representative will reach out to you by phone or email, potentially ask you some questions about some of these areas. And so I didn't want you all to be caught off guard in being communicated and asked questions and not really knowing, well, what's the context? Where is this coming from? Phase 3 is what they call the closeout phase. Let me go back. So in engagement, they will also come to us on site. They will do some virtual engagement with us. We are scheduled for an on-site engagement in early December. Merry Christmas to us. And y'all, we are really approaching this as we will put our best foot forward as a state. But also going into this, just as we expect our LEAs to do with monitoring, with a sense of feedback, right? What feedback, what improvements, what suggestions that will help us further our continuous improvement efforts. I really feel like as a state, that's our goal, is to continue to see outcomes grow and to have this continuous growth mindset and improvement mindset. And so they will be on site with us, likely in December. So they will probably begin to reach out to stakeholders early this fall. If I have a heads up or if I know, I'll certainly communicate with you all via email and let you know what further to expect. Phase 3 is what they call the closeout phase, which is when we will get an actual closeout letter, much like we do with our LEAs, with what are those areas of strengths? What are those findings and recommendations? And they will instruct the state, if there's anything that we have to fix immediately, here's what you need to do, versus here are some recommendations, some things we'd like to see you improve upon and do. And the closeout phase, what we're seeing with other states who are going through this process recently, is that could take up to a year. Of course, we are going to be those people saying, like, where are our results? Nobody wants to wait a year for their feedback. But that's just kind of their cautious timeline is up to a year to kind of receive that closeout letter for a state. So I really just wanted to give you all a high level overview. What are really a couple of those components that they will come in and ask questions or ask processes about. I believe for you all as a state panel, they will ask you questions about the business that we conduct. How do we work together? What are some of the big impacts that you all have made? And so, of course, when I sort of introduce our state and do a big overview, I will be bragging a lot about the work that you all do around policy and how you really help us move work forward and have helped us to improve outcomes for kids for our state. So just want to kind of leave that there. If y'all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them best I can around this, but wanted to give you all a heads up that that's coming and that I'll be sharing your contact information that's on file with us. Okay. If you all will entertain, we would like to go back and do our co-chair election so that we can have an official co-chair for our November meeting. And so the way in which we do these officer elections is we can accept nominations for others or self-nominations of anyone who is interested in serving as co-chair. And then the order in which we receive those nominations is the order in which we will vote yay or nay for each nomination. And so if the first nomination receives a majority of the votes, that person will be selected to serve in the role. And if not, it goes to the second person who is nominated, and then we vote on the second person. So at this time, we will open it up for nominations for the position of co-chair for our Special Education Advisory Panel. Ashley.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Christine Hargrave.
Any other willing folks to help us? This is a great group to co-chair. Any other nominations? If we have no other nominations, we will close nominations. And do we have a motion to actually, Dr. Hargrave, do you accept the nomination? Okay, all right, I'll fix that, Christine. Do I have it wrong?
That's amazing.
No, we don't. I just gave you one posthumously today. I just gave you one. It's okay. Great. Okay, so we will take a vote. So we have, oh, that's right. Ashley motioned and a second by Ms. Champagne. And we need to do a roll call vote. I don't think so. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. So if you just say yes or no, yay or nay, to Christine serving as co-chair. Melissa Bam. Ms. Champagne. Aaron Downing. Christy Gonzalez. Christine Hargrave. That's where I messed up, Christy. I have it as doctor on my sign-in sheet. That's what I did. Brandy Hewling. Caroline Jurish.
Yes.
Ashley McReynolds. Dr. Donna Reno. Julia Tanner. And Jessica White. Congratulations, Christine. You are selected to be our co-chair for SEAP. Wonderful. Well,
That's always.
any discussion, public comment? Liam? Hargrave. Great. Well, with that, we have conducted our business. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your flexibility and coming out today. And I think you all did great work. You know, I told you all that every single meeting, we were going to work really hard, and you guys always do, and you always show up. So I certainly appreciate that. And we will adjourn at 11:42. Ms. Champagne, did you have anything else? Yes, that date is November the 12th. Chelsea, check that for me. Will you check November the 12th date? We did have to this year do a couple of different dates. We normally like Wednesdays for consistency, but we struggle with room availability. So I think that was the issue, Christy. That's when we have the room booked, right? Yep. So it's November the 12th. All right. Thank you, guys. Be safe traveling. Christy, it finally opened up for you. Yes. We know, she was in it.
And we just got, yeah, more importantly.
That is brutal.
Yes, it usually takes me like an hour and 40 minutes, if that, and there was nobody working on the bridge. They just had cones out. That's what gets me. They just had the cones out. They were getting like planning to start working, but there was nobody actually working. It was just cones, so.
Uh-huh, I saw that.
Cause I'm trying to be so good. If I need to, okay. You emailed it to me?
Y'all have a good day. You too.
People work too hard for that title, and I didn't do that. Thank you. Have a good one. Okay, fine, got it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. You can't just not keep it in the same.
group, and every other like this push last night, and we had, you know, put on a newsletter, and that got up to 7,400, so, you know, and it's a big deal. Everything we want is super good awareness, especially for that, I mean, training, especially if you're in the field, so.
Yeah, well,
Just move us into that.
we'll partner with you guys on that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, you know, there's a lot of turnover in our charter schools too.
Yeah.
But like, we always struggle, even as a
Yeah.
we struggle to get information to like the school and teachers. Like, we do a lot
So-
of support, you know?
One of the things we're working on, we have our annual awards, and then we have an art contest.
Yes.
And we send it out to the schools every year. So we actually have a list of like the diocese and just the local school system throughout the state, and it's like 400 schools or something like that. So that would be something we could definitely do a targeted thing to say, hey, here's
Yeah,
information
just
we have
sound
done.
like
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
absolutely. So yeah, like I said, anything you from us, let us know.
Perfect. Yeah, we can do that. We'll design some communication.
Yeah.
We have actually created tons of resources on implementation resources, like if they don't know how, it's communicating. You gotta do it over and over and over, because people turn over, they forget. I was feeling the kudos that I did not, Rebecca Hand, our implement expert, she's really good resource. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. but everything is okay.
Ashley, it's your contact. Good, this is a good group, like, they're not afraid to like take action, they're like, okay, let's do it. Pick it up, I need to know who endorsed that, because I got it, it was, I had like, at that point, it was zone policy.
Yeah.
It was Ashley and Simone for that, it was Ashley, Reynolds, Simone.
We're on this side, is the second is, might have been, was it Christine? Oh, hey, it was no.
Oh, I know, that was the discussion.
Was it Christy Gonzalez?
Yeah, it was Christie. You got some every time.
That's-
We put you on staff here too.
No, I don't know if you can afford me, but I'll come for free.
They can't afford you, Leon.
Yeah, probably not.
Thanks, have a good one.